Good evening, everyone. Today's date is May 21, 2013. The time is now 7 p.m. A couple of reminders before we proceed. Could we please have everyone who has a cell phone, if you could either set it to vibrate or turn it off, we would appreciate that. Council will now please come to order, and I see we have a lot of folks in the audience. Welcome to all of you. We appreciate your taking time from your busy schedule to be here with us. Would you join me and rise so that we can say the Pledge of Allegiance? I
pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Ms. Garrett, would you please conduct the roll call?
Bolton? Here. Donato?
Here.
Matei?
Here.
Miles? Here. Shu?
Here.
Velasquez?
Here.
Dr. Gonzalez?
Here. For the record, a quorum is present, and council may proceed with business.
Madam Mayor,
Yes, sir.
if I may please, before we get into the business at hand, if we can have a moment of quiet reflection for the folks in Oklahoma.
Yes, I think that would be very appropriate. Thank you, Anthony.
Thank you.
Thank you for reminding us. The first action item on the agenda this evening is consideration of approval of the minutes from the regular meeting of May 7, 2013. Are there any corrections or comments?
At your seating places, there's 4 replacement pages.
Okay.
If you'll consider those when considering the minutes in total, please.
Do we have a motion to approve the minutes as amended? So moved. Motion by Ms. Velasquez and second by Ms. Bolton. Any discussion or comments?
Roger, were there significant changes to the minutes?
One of them was, one of them had an incorrect year. Instead of saying 2014, it said 2104. Yes.
Technicalities.
And I believe we're ready for the roll call.
Bolton?
Yes.
Donato?
Yes.
Matei?
Yes.
Miles?
Yes.
Shu?
Yes.
Velasquez?
Yes.
Dr. Gonzalez?
Yes. The next agenda item is item 3A, and that is a public hearing. At this time, I will call the public hearing to order and note for the record that the date is May 21, 2013. I am Bernadette Baca Gonzalez, the mayor of the city of Trinidad, and will be presiding over this hearing. This is a public hearing on an application for the transfer of ownership of a 3-2 beer on-premises license to Creative Sales Incorporated for a premises sale of beer to occur at 700 Smith Street, which is the Central Park ballpark. This license was formerly held by the Trinidad and Los Animas County Chamber of Commerce. The applicant is presently operating under a temporary permit. Because Mr. Downs is an officer of the Chamber of Commerce, I shall ask for any introductory information or remarks from Mr. Aker. And Mr. Aker, do you have any information to share with council regarding the matters before we consider public comment?
The only thing I wanted to share for members of council is there were a series of questions that were asked by several members of council regarding the transfer. And we put that information together. We got it quickly today. Those questions were, is the transfer of a liquor license from a nonprofit to a for-profit organization legally permissible? And we both checked with both CML and the state liquor licensing authority, and they said yes. Is a new organization required by law to obtain a new license? Again, no, it's not. They applied for the transfer, and that is what accepts them as having ownership of the license. Another question was, what are legal limits or prohibitions on the transfer of a liquor license? There's some ownership identities, local authorities limitations. There's quite a bit of detail, but the transferee meets all those conditions. There was a question about the grantee being an out-of-state company, and does that prevent the transfer? That does not. He's, in this case, Creative Sales has done all the correct paperwork, and it's included in your packet as far as being able to do business in the state of Colorado. So with that, I think they've satisfied at least some of the questions that I've gotten from members of City Council regarding that liquor license transfer. And I believe, in talking with Mr. Downs, he's got 2 simple questions to ask him, and then we should be ready to go.
Mr. Downs?
Madam Mayor, Council, thank you. I do want to just let you know that the standard for a transfer of ownership of a liquor license is very easily met. The only 2 criteria essentially are if the applicant is over the age of 21 and therefore of legal age to possess liquor, to be on a liquor license. The only other question is whether or not the applicant is of sufficient moral character that they would not otherwise be prohibited from owning a liquor license or being on a liquor license. And so I am more than happy to ask those questions. I know Mr. Dunn, as was pointed out earlier, is here, and I'm happy to ask those questions in support of his application for the transfer of the liquor license if you would like.
Yes, sir. You may
All right,
proceed.
Madam Mayor, thank you. Mr. Dunn, would you come forward, please? And would you identify yourself for the record, if you would?
My name is Andrew Dunn, and the one correction is Creative Sale is singular, not Creative Sales.
I beg your pardon. I
No, it
got carried
happens.
away.
It's been happening forever. It's a common.
And Mr. Dunn, if you would please, I'm first going to ask you, are you the applicant for Creative Sale LLC?
I'm the applicant. It's a one-man LLC in Texas.
And you are that
That's for,
one?
yes.
Okay, you are that one.
I am that one person, yes.
Okay, and Mr. Dunn, I am going to ask you, sir, just for the record, how old are you?
I'm 36,
Okay, and what is your date of birth, please?
11/11/76.
All right, and Mr. Dunn, did you submit the application and the paperwork that is before council this evening?
I did,
And you did that in support of your application for the transfer of liquor license?
correct.
And Mr. Dunn, just so we're clear, what is your business? We all know, but I'm just trying to make sure that the record is accurate and complete. What is the nature of your business that brings you to Trinidad?
Professional baseball. I own 8 professional baseball teams from Alpine, Texas to Trinidad.
And are you the commissioner of the Pecos League?
I am.
Okay, and the Pecos League is the league that those baseball teams play under?
Yes, sir.
Okay, now Mr. Dunn, just more to the point. You, on one of the forums, you were asked, as is everybody, questions such as, do you have any criminal convictions?
I do not have any criminal convictions.
And have you ever been charged with anything like fraud or anything of that nature?
I have not.
And have you ever been a defendant in a huge lawsuit?
Never have.
And on the questions that you answered in support of your application, the questions regarding your moral character, sir, did you answer those questions correctly and accurately?
I did.
All right, thank you, Mr. Dunn. Madam Mayor, Council, I have nothing further. I will tell you the background checks have not come back yet, but it is my opinion that once Mr. Dunn answers the questions, that these questions are answered correctly and accurately, that we have met, he has met, I don't mean to say we, he has met the burden of proof for good moral character for the transfer. And I would now submit to you and offer for submission all the exhibits in support of the application for the transfer of ownership.
The entire agenda packet for item 3A is admitted into the record unless there is an objection. I think at this point, are there any questions from members of council?
I just have one, Madam Mayor, if I
Yes,
can
yes.
ask. Mr. Dunn, as far as the sales of liquor, they are gonna be confined within the stadium itself, within the grandstand, right?
Yes, sir, just like last year.
Nothing goes out of that grandstand.
Nothing can come in or out. People can't bring anything else in or bring anything out is the rule.
Okay, and you know you're only licensed with only 3.2%.
Yes, sir.
And that's just beer.
Yes, sir.
Right, okay. Another question I have, and I don't know if this is true or not, but I'm gonna ask you if you know anything about this. Is I heard a couple times last year when the Triggers were playing, at different times there was some pretty hard liquor that was sold out of the grandstand. And this is when we had tents up and stuff like this. Now, this is what people told me. I'm not asking you if this is.
Sure, I'm unaware of that, and I know that the process that we're eligible to sell for is 3.2. That's all so we would never sell anything but 3.2. Have people tried to sneak things into a baseball game? Probably. I'll tell you that, and we've found things that we don't sell in the trash can before, but we're gonna sell 3.2 beer and we're gonna follow the rules. What people did last year, I don't know, we didn't sell beer last year. So, I don't know, I really don't know how to answer that any better.
I would just, one more question, Madam Mayor, is that, I would just like to remind you that being the sole ownership of this liquor license, that I think this council is gonna put the trust in you
Sure.
to make sure that none of this is done outside the grandstand, as far as, other different liquor that could be sold, that can't be sold there.
Sure, we wouldn't take that risk.
And I think our police department and stuff like that will probably be keeping a little extra eye on stuff that's going on at the park. So just from my standpoint, just please be aware that if this happens, I'm holding my trust in you to come forward or get a hold of our police department just to
Sure.
inform them and tell them what's going on, okay?
We're buying from Budweiser 3.2 only, that's all we have to sell, so.
And that's a retail. I
The
mean,
retail 12-ounce cans, is what we're selling, that's all we have to sell, so anything else is not gonna be coming from us, I can assure you. So,
that's all I have.
I'll just make a comment. In order for a wholesaler to sell liquor to them, they would have to present a full liquor license. So I'll just mention that, that's one layer
Well,
of
that's-
additional.
Yeah, I understand that. Okay. That's all the questions I have.
Any questions from this side?
Not for me.
Oh, Ms. Smiles?
Yeah, and perhaps I direct this to you, Mr. Downs.
Yes, ma'am.
In our last meeting, when we approved licenses, we made them contingent on receipt of fingerprints.
That's correct.
I've done fingerprints at Trinidad PD.
I understand, and that's absolutely correct, Councilwoman Miles, and I will tell you, we did, and that is in part because they were, it was a new license, and there wasn't as much, I mean, the standard is lower for a transfer of ownership, but if they were to be untruthful on those questions, not saying that that's the case, but if it were to come back as they were being untruthful, you could suspend the liquor license. Right now, for purposes of transferring the liquor license, it is sufficient that they represent that they have answered the questions correctly. And it's
I guess I don't understand why transfer to a new party is any, I'm looking for consistency here.
Sure.
And I'm just wondering, why is the burden lower? I mean, we have a new party here, and last week we had new parties.
Right.
And if I were them, I would say I was treated unequally.
Well, and the best answer I can say that I can give is, it is an existing liquor license, and it's going from one entity to another. And that doesn't necessarily lower your expectations of them as a licensee, but I think it is meeting the burden that is,
Why is it a lower level? There's a new person involved in the new liquor license that was granted last week to Carmel,
right.
okay? This is a new person. Why is that different?
I don't know the answer why. I can't give you a very good answer, other than it is an existing liquor license in the
It's being
state.
transferred to a new party.
I understand.
The fact
I
that it
understand.
exists and it was held
Right.
by someone who has the fingerprint
Sure.
test is irrelevant. We're transferring it to a new party.
Right, I understand, and Mr. Dunn is kind of in the same position as is Mr. Davis or, Ms. Bourgeois.
I would just recommend that all people get treated equally.
And I am all about equal protection, and I
If
understand
we-
that.
If we make that exception here and go for a revocation, then we should countermand what we did last week.
And I,
At the last council meeting.
and I would say, if this helps, the council can grant the liquor license contingent upon the receipt of the background checks. And again, it's kind of 6 of one, half dozen of another. That is, again, if you were to say, okay, you haven't, and then there were untruthful answers, you can revoke the liquor license. But in this instance, you can make the granting of the transfer of ownership also conditioned upon receipt of the background checks.
And one of the problems why there's that delay, my understanding is that there's been a considerable uptick in the demand for background checks,
That's right.
probably related to firearm transactions.
That's correct.
So would you recommend that at the appropriate time, the motion include language contingent upon satisfactory receipt of background check?
I would. Yes, ma'am, I would.
Are there any additional questions, Ms. Miles?
I have one other. Will the state approve a transfer without fingerprints?
Yes. It is my understanding that the state will do the same thing, and that the local liquor licensing authority in this situation goes first. I know sometimes the state does, especially in violations, but it's my understanding the state will condition upon this, if the local liquor licensing authority does as well. And I could defer to Ms. Garrett and ask if that is her experience.
I thought the answer at the last meeting was that they would not. They would require the fingerprints for the new licenses.
It's basically the same situation. They would have the power to revoke that license. If fingerprint results came back to them and they saw something that would preclude somebody from holding a license, they would revoke that license. They would take action immediately, just like city council could. But for me to say whether or not they have fingerprint results, I don't think they do. They're as backlogged as, we would get them at the same time basically as
Okay,
the
well,
state.
my point is I'm not against, I certainly don't want to impede commerce here at all. I just want the three parties to be treated equally.
Well, and then there will be a fourth one with our next application that will be.
Right.
Are we prepared to do that? I suppose so. If this is interminable, I suppose we should inform, what action would we need to take to grant the license for Mount Carmel and SCRT, and then have the provision that be revoked? Because last time we said it was contingent upon that. We didn't grant it and then said it would revoke it. I just want to make sure people are being treated equally.
Understood. And if I understand your concern correctly, Councilwoman Miles, I would say that you could do the exact same thing and say that the transfer of ownership, and I know I've already said this, but the transfer of ownership is conditioned upon the background checks coming back favorable.
Well, since these things look like they're going to be backlogged forever, I would rather presume that he's not a felon.
Sure,
And I'd rather presume that Scott Canlon is not a felon.
right.
I just want to know, can we undo what we did the last time so that those two people are treated equally?
Now, Michelle, looking at our minutes from those hearings last meeting, it recites in the final finding, approval is given contingent upon satisfactory fingerprint/background results being returned.
Right, which means,
We approved it contingent upon those coming in satisfactory. There is no mention in here of revocation.
no, I think what we did was we approved it, saying that we need to take no further action as long as those fingerprints come back correctly. There is no liquor license. We've discussed this at the prior meeting. There is no liquor license until that contingency is met. We'll often do that for a fire extinguisher violation or some sort of egress violation. We'll say, as soon as you satisfy it, then you get your license.
last meeting, I specifically asked, can I issue the license? I needed that clarification as well, and the answer was, yes, you
Yes.
can. Because even if fingerprint results were to come back and there was something in there that would result in a revocation potentially, you would still afford that licensing due process. They would still be afforded a hearing to revoke that license because you have to.
Okay, I remember the answer to that being it's irrelevant because the state won't issue it, you agree?
Well, the state would take the same action. They would have to afford that same due process. So that's a true statement. They would probably get those fingerprint results before the city would because they're a like state agency. So they would take that action before we ever.
The state is going to allow those entities to sell liquor before they get fingerprints back?
True statement, yes. They have, Mount Carmel and SCRT both have licenses in hand.
They can sell today.
They
That
sold,
was not my
they could
understanding
sell
last
as
time.
of,
Sell it today.
they sold as of Thursday after the meeting. They had a license in hand that quickly.
No, they had a special events permit for that.
They actually had their regular licenses in hand. They both had paid for a concurrent review and their licenses
All
were
right, my
received back.
I'll stand corrected. My understanding was that it was, a contingency means that you don't get it, you get it contingent upon that event.
That was why I asked the question, am I able to issue the license? Because in some instances, okay, brand new license that hasn't met all of the code requirements, if it's contingent on that, we're restricted. We
Okay, I
can't
was under the
issue
impression that the
license.
state would not push it through, and I remember
No, the
asking that
state
question.
will.
As long as everyone's got their liquor license, I don't have an issue.
Yeah, and they do.
So let's just let it go.
Any additional questions
So
from
actually,
council?
Madam Mayor, so
Yes, sir.
actually, we're just waiting for the fingerprints of Mr. Dunn then to come back to us, right? Or create a
Well,
sale.
he
Well-
actually has a license.
Well, I know that, but that,
We are, and we are waiting for the fingerprints to come back, and if they were to come back, with a hit, with some kind of, some kind of bad information, then you as the local liquor licensing authority would take action if they were to come back. But what you are doing is granting the liquor license transfer contingent upon your eventual receipt of a favorable background check. That is them coming in the way Mr. Dunn said they're going to come in, which is free and clear.
As far as I'm concerned, as long as everyone's being treated equally, I'm fine with it.
Okay, yes, ma'am.
Any additional questions from council? And I'd like to give an opportunity to members of the public, if there is anyone who cares to address the issue of transfer of license ownership from the Trinidad and Los Animas County Chamber of Commerce to Creative Sale Incorporated. Is there anyone who would care to address council regarding this matter?
I have one question. Who is going to be liable?
Would you come
Please-
forward and identify
please
yourself?
Yeah, please come forward and identify yourself, sir.
Ralph Ponce, I'm the president of the association here in Trinidad,
Yes, sir.
and I also have a liquor license, but I was wondering who would be liable for any accidents or whatever if somebody was to get hurt or killed from his transfer of license.
I believe there was a requirement for liability insurance,
Yes,
and
ma'am.
that has been met.
That's correct.
Proof has been
So
provided.
the Chamber of Commerce wouldn't be responsible for it, it would be the.
No, it would be Creative Sale Incorporated.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
As insured by, through Bree.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, that's what we're doing.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank
You're
you.
welcome. Is there anyone else who would care to ask a question, make a comment regarding this transfer? And seeing none? And if there are no other comments, I will close the hearing, and I believe it would be appropriate to entertain a motion to approve the transfer of the 3-2 beer on-premises license to Creative Sale Incorporated for a premises sale of beer to occur at 700 Smith Street, which is Central Park Ballpark. And Mr. Downs, would we say contingent upon satisfactory evidence that the background check has been completed.
Yes, ma'am, that's correct.
So moved.
Motion by Ms. Miles,
Second?
second by Ms. Bolton. Any discussion? And I believe we're ready for the roll call.
Bolton?
Yes.
Benado?
Yes.
Matei?
Yes.
Miles?
Yes.
Shu?
Yes.
Velasquez?
Yes.
Dr. Gonzalez?
Yes. Thank you. We will allow you to return to the baseball game.
I agree.
The next agenda item is agenda item 3B, which is a transfer of license ownership public hearing. For the record, again, I will state that today's date is May 21, 2013. I am Bernadette Baca Gonzalez, Mayor of the City of Trinidad, and will be presiding over this hearing. This is a public hearing on an application for the transfer of ownership of a retail liquor store license requested by Trinidad Beer, Liquor, and Wine Depot, LLC, doing business as Trinidad Beer, Liquor, and Wine Depot, located at 111 East Kansas Avenue, formerly Kenneth R. Gagelman, doing business as Trinidad Beer, Liquor, and Wine Depot. And Mr. Downs, do you have any information you wish to share with council regarding this matter?
Madam Mayor and members of council, I do. And could I please have Mr. Gegelman come forward if we could in support of this application?
Mr. Gagelman, if you could come forward to the podium, please. And Mr. Downs, as we did with the last, I believe you have a series of questions that we can go through the procedures required.
I do, Madam Mayor, if I may. Good evening, sir.
Good evening.
Would you please state your full name, if you would?
Kenneth R. Gagelman,
And Mr. Gegelman, I won't ask how old you are. That's kind of impolite.
31.
Thank you. Thank you. Are you over 21?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And Mr. Gegelman, you are the applicant for this transfer of ownership, you and your wife.
Yes, sir.
And your wife is Mrs. Olga Gegelman?
Yes.
Okay. The record should reflect a long pause. And sir, you were the owner of the liquor license previously?
Yes, it was.
And is it correct, Mr. Gegelman, that you're going from a sole proprietorship, if this is granted, to a limited liability corporation?
Yes.
From you, the two of you?
Yes.
Okay. Now, sir, you submitted background checks in support of your application,
Yes.
and you answered the questions on those forms. And did you answer them accurately and correctly?
Yes, sir.
All right, Mr. Gegelman, how long have you lived in the area?
Since 1976.
Okay. Thank you, sir. I have no further questions.
Thank you. Are there any questions from council? No questions from council. I would thank you for stepping forward, and I
Thank you.
believe, Mr. Downs, you would like me to take notice and admit into the record the entire packet for item 3B?
I would, Madam Mayor, yes. And the reason why I asked the last question is simply because the Trinidad Police Department background checks did come back, and he's been here for a lot of years, and clearly he has no discernible record here locally. So I believe that he and Mrs. Gegelman do meet the criteria.
Okay. Is there any member of the audience, member of the public, who would care to comment or ask questions to council regarding this proposed transfer? And seeing none, I believe at this time, if there are no questions or comments, I will close the hearing. And I believe we are ready to entertain a motion to approve the transfer of ownership of a retail liquor license requested by Trinidad Beer, Liquor, and Wine Depot, LLC, doing business as Trinidad Beer, Liquor, and Wine Depot, located at 111 East Kansas Avenue, formerly Kenneth R. Gagelman, DBA